Sometimes the greatest love story begins with a mistake neither heart is brave enough to correct. I woke to sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, my head pounding just enough to remind me that Las Vegas had lived up to every reckless promise people whispered about. The silk sheets felt unfamiliar beneath my fingertips, the room far too luxurious to belong to me, and for one strange second I honestly wondered if I had walked into the wrong suite the night before. Then I heard the shower running. My stomach tightened. Charlotte Whitmore never slept past 6 in the morning. Billionaire CEO. America's favorite business icon. My best friend for nearly 15 years. The woman who planned every meeting to the minute and organized vacations with color-coded calendars. The woman who hated surprises almost as much as she hated losing control. I turned toward the nightstand, reaching for my phone, only for something cold to catch my attention. A platinum wedding band rested on my left hand. My breath stopped. I stared at it, hoping exhaustion was playing tricks on me, but the ring remained exactly where it was, catching the Nevada sunlight with cruel confidence. Before I could make sense of it, the bathroom door opened, releasing a cloud of warm steam. Charlotte stepped out, her blonde hair still damp, dressed in one of the hotel robes, her blue eyes locking onto mine before drifting toward my hand. She froze. Then, without saying a word, she slowly lifted her own left hand. An identical ring gleamed against her skin. Neither of us spoke for what felt like an entire lifetime. Finally, she whispered, "Emily, tell me we didn't." I wanted to laugh because the alternative was screaming. I honestly don't know. Charlotte crossed the room with careful steps, her usual confidence replaced by something I had never seen before. Fear. She picked up a thick envelope resting beside an expensive bottle of champagne someone had thoughtfully delivered overnight. Across the front, elegant gold lettering read, "Congratulations, Mrs. and Mrs. Whitmore." My heartbeat echoed louder than the traffic 30 floors below. Charlotte slowly opened the envelope, removing an official Clark County marriage certificate. Our names were printed beside each other in unmistakable black ink. Charlotte Whitmore. Emily Carter. Married just after midnight. Witnessed. Filed. Legal. I watched the color drain from her face. "This has to be some elaborate joke," I muttered, even though I already knew it wasn't. Charlotte looked toward the enormous window overlooking the strip, her reflection standing beside mine in the glass like two strangers pretending to know each other. "My board meeting is Monday morning," she said quietly. "If the media finds out before we understand what happened," she never finished the sentence. My phone buzzed. Then hers. Then mine again. Messages flooded in from friends, coworkers, and reporters whose numbers I didn't recognize. Somehow the news was already moving faster than either of us could think. Charlotte inhaled slowly, forcing herself back into the composed woman the world expected her to be, but I noticed her hands trembling almost imperceptibly. "We need facts," she said. "Every receipt. Every photo. Every hour we can remember." I nodded, still unable to stop staring at the ring that suddenly felt much heavier than a simple piece of platinum. Neither of us noticed the second envelope tucked beneath the marriage certificate until Charlotte reached for the hotel folder again. It contained 2 sealed handwritten letters, one addressed to her and one addressed to me, both dated exactly 10 years earlier in handwriting I recognized instantly. My own. Charlotte carefully placed both unopened letters back inside the hotel folder as though touching them any longer might somehow rewrite the past. Her blue eyes lingered on the faded handwriting before she slid the folder across the marble table toward me. "Not yet," she said quietly. "If we read those now, we will never know whether they explain what happened or simply confuse us even more." I nodded even though curiosity was pulling at every thought in my mind. My phone continued vibrating across the nightstand, filling the room with an endless stream of notifications. Friends from the conference. Coworkers. 3 missed calls from my younger sister. Unknown numbers from New York and Los Angeles. Charlotte picked up her own phone, glanced at the screen for less than a second, then placed it face down again. "The board already knows something happened," she admitted. My chief of staff never calls 5 times unless the situation is serious. I walked toward the enormous window overlooking the strip. The city looked exactly as it had the night before, bright, carefree, almost laughing at us. Somewhere down there we had apparently celebrated, danced, signed legal documents, smiled for photographs we had not yet seen, and promised each other forever without remembering a single meaningful detail. "Do you remember anything after dinner?" I asked. Charlotte closed her eyes, searching through memories that refused to cooperate. The charity gala. The rooftop reception. You convinced me to try that ridiculous blue cocktail because you said it matched the skyline. I smiled despite everything. You hated it. I did. For the first time that morning, the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. Then we walked through the casino. Someone recognized you, I added slowly. A woman asked for a photograph. Charlotte nodded. After that, everything becomes fragments. There were flashes. Music. Laughter. Someone cheering. A chapel with stained glass that looked almost unreal. Then nothing. We stared at each other as if the missing hours were standing invisibly between us. A sharp knock interrupted the silence. Charlotte immediately straightened her posture, transforming back into the composed executive the business world admired. A hotel manager entered with an apologetic smile and a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Whitmore," he began politely before stopping when he noticed both of us exchange startled looks. "I apologize. I was asked to deliver copies of the photographs from last night's ceremony. They were included in your premium wedding package." My heartbeat quickened as he left the portfolio on the table and quietly excused himself. Neither of us moved for several long seconds. Finally, I opened it. The first photograph showed us standing beneath soft white lights inside a small chapel. Charlotte was looking at me instead of the officiant. I was laughing at something she had apparently whispered. The second photograph showed us holding hands. The third captured us exchanging rings. There was no hesitation in either face. No uncertainty. No visible regret. Only warmth that felt impossible to fake. Charlotte slowly sat down, studying each image with growing disbelief. "We do not look like two people making a mistake," she whispered. Before I could answer, another envelope slipped from the back of the portfolio. Unlike the first one, this carried the logo of the chapel. Inside was a small flash drive labeled simply, "Ceremony Recording." Charlotte looked at me, her calm expression finally cracking. "Emily," she said softly, "what if the answers we are searching for are not hidden in those old letters at all? What if we already told each other everything last night and simply cannot remember a single word?" Charlotte connected the flash drive to her laptop without saying another word. The screen remained black for a moment before the recording began, slightly shaky as though filmed by someone laughing behind the camera. Soft piano music drifted through the speakers while a tiny white chapel came into view beneath the brilliant Las Vegas sky. Then the camera found us. I leaned closer without realizing it. Charlotte stood beside me wearing the same elegant black dress from the charity gala, her blonde hair slightly windswept, smiling in a way I had rarely seen outside private moments. It was not the polished smile she reserved for magazine covers or shareholder meetings. It was lighter, almost carefree. Beside her, I looked equally relaxed, laughing as I reached over to straighten the collar of her jacket. Neither of us seemed uncomfortable. Neither of us looked confused. The officiant welcomed everyone before asking whether we wished to continue. I held my breath, expecting hesitation. Instead, two clear voices answered at the same time. "Yes." Charlotte slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the sofa, unable to look away. The recording continued. We joked with each other during the ceremony. At one point I accidentally laughed so hard that I covered my face with both hands, and Charlotte gently squeezed my shoulder until I calmed down. It was such a natural gesture that it almost hurt to watch. "We have always done that," I whispered, more to myself than to her. Charlotte nodded faintly. I never even noticed. Then came the vows. They were not the traditional words printed inside the chapel booklet. The officiant smiled as Charlotte quietly explained that we wanted to speak from the heart instead. My pulse quickened. Charlotte looked directly into my eyes on the screen, her expression calm but unmistakably emotional. "Emily," she said in the recording, "every major decision in my life has been easier because somewhere in the world I knew you believed in me. If tomorrow erased every business deal I ever made, I think I would still measure my success by whether you were standing beside me." I felt something tighten in my chest. Those were not careless words spoken by someone making a reckless decision after too much celebration. They were thoughtful, deliberate, real. The recording shifted to me. I smiled at Charlotte with a tenderness I had never consciously recognized before. "You have spent years convincing the world that you never need anyone," I said. "But I hope someday you realize you have never had to carry everything alone because I would have walked beside you anyway." Charlotte quietly covered her mouth with one hand. Neither of us spoke as the ceremony ended with applause from complete strangers who looked genuinely happy for us. The final moment showed us walking outside into the warm Nevada afternoon. We were still holding hands, not because anyone asked us to, but because neither of us seemed interested in letting go. The video ended. Silence settled over the suite again, heavier than before but strangely different. The confusion that had filled the morning had been replaced by something much harder to explain. These were not two friends pretending to be in love for one unforgettable night. Whatever had happened inside that chapel had already existed long before we stepped through its doors. Charlotte slowly reached for the unopened letters resting on the table. Her fingertips brushed the faded envelopes before she looked at me with uncertain blue eyes. "If we wrote our hearts 10 years ago," she whispered, "I think it is finally time to discover whether we have been waiting an entire decade to hear what was already true." Charlotte drew a slow breath before breaking the seal on the first envelope. The paper inside had yellowed ever so slightly with time, and the careful handwriting immediately carried us back to a version of ourselves that no longer existed. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before reading aloud. "Dear Emily, if you are reading this, then somehow I finally found the courage I have been borrowing from you for years." Her voice almost disappeared by the end of the sentence. I looked at her in disbelief. Charlotte Whitmore had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without blinking, yet these few handwritten words made her hands tremble. She continued reading. "You once told me that success only matters if you have someone to celebrate it with." I smiled and changed the subject because admitting how much that sentence meant would have changed everything between us. "I do not know if I am brave enough for that. You deserve someone uncomplicated. Someone who does not spend more nights inside conference rooms than at home. Someone who can promise certainty. I can only promise that every city I visit feels a little less lonely after I call you." She stopped reading and closed her eyes. Silence settled between us again, but this time it felt warm rather than frightening. I could remember that season of our lives with surprising clarity. Charlotte had just accepted the position that transformed her company into a global name. I had celebrated every victory with her, never realizing she had been fighting an entirely different battle in private. "I never received that letter," I whispered. "I know," she replied softly. "Because I never mailed it." She folded the paper with extraordinary care before sliding my envelope across the table. "Your turn." My fingers felt strangely unsteady as I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably mine, only younger and more hopeful. I swallowed before reading aloud. "Dear Charlotte, every time someone asks why I never seem interested in dating, I give them a different answer because I cannot tell them the truth. The truth is that every important memory I want to make somehow already includes you." I paused, staring at words I could barely believe I had written. Charlotte watched me without speaking. I continued. "I know you probably see me as your dependable best friend, and honestly that should be enough. But sometimes I wonder what would happen if we stopped pretending that the happiest days of my year are always the ones I spend beside you. I will probably never send this because I would rather protect our friendship than risk losing you forever." My voice cracked on the final sentence. I lowered the page into my lap, unable to continue. Neither of us had spoken those feelings out loud 10 years ago. Neither of us had been rejected. Neither of us had chosen someone else. We had simply remained silent at exactly the same moment, allowing an entire decade to pass while believing the other person could never possibly feel the same way. Charlotte looked toward the wedding photograph still lying on the coffee table. "Do you realize what this means?" she asked quietly. I nodded, tears threatening to form despite my best effort to stay composed. We did not fall in love in Las Vegas. Charlotte gave the smallest, saddest smile I had ever seen. No. We simply woke up before we realized we had never stopped. Just then her phone rang again. This time she answered. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every passing second. After ending the call, she looked directly at me. "The board has scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning in New York," she said. "And they expect my wife to be standing beside me." The flight back to New York felt strangely quieter than any business trip Charlotte and I had ever shared. We had crossed the country together dozens of times over the years, laughing over airport coffee, arguing about which movies deserved Academy Awards, and making impossible promises to spend less time working. This time we sat side by side in the private cabin, our wedding bands catching the afternoon sunlight every time one of us reached for a cup of coffee or turned another page of the financial reports spread across the table. Nothing between us had physically changed except 2 simple rings, yet everything felt different. Charlotte finally closed her laptop and leaned back with a thoughtful sigh. "The board will not be concerned about my personal life," she said. "They will be concerned about unpredictability. Investors dislike surprises." I smiled faintly. "Marrying your best friend overnight definitely qualifies as a surprise." She actually laughed, soft enough that only I could hear it. "Yes. It probably does." The sound warmed something inside me that I had not realized had been waiting for years. Before either of us could say anything else, Charlotte's chief of staff entered the cabin carrying a tablet. "The media has been remarkably respectful so far," she explained. "Most outlets are simply reporting the marriage. They are calling it unexpected but surprisingly heartwarming." Charlotte accepted the tablet and silently handed it to me. Headlines filled the screen beside photographs from the chapel. "Billionaire CEO marries lifelong friend." "Unexpected Vegas wedding captures hearts." "Business leader finds love with best friend of 15 years." I blinked in surprise. "They think this is a love story." Charlotte looked out the window at the clouds drifting beneath us. "Maybe they are seeing something we refuse to see." After landing, we drove directly to Charlotte's penthouse overlooking Central Park. I had visited countless times before, but walking through the front door now felt strangely unfamiliar. The housekeeper welcomed us with her usual warm smile before pausing when she noticed the rings. "Congratulations, Mrs. Whitmore," she said naturally, looking first at Charlotte and then at me. There was no hesitation in her voice. No judgment. Only genuine happiness. I found myself smiling back before I even realized it. Later that evening we shared dinner in the quiet kitchen instead of the formal dining room. Charlotte insisted on making grilled cheese sandwiches herself, laughing when I reminded her that billionaires were not usually known for standing over a skillet. "You forget," she replied while carefully flipping the bread, "you are the one who taught me how to cook these during that snowstorm in Boston." I remembered. Our hotel had lost power. We had improvised dinner over a tiny portable burner while talking until sunrise. Somehow I had forgotten how many of my happiest memories already belonged to her. As we cleared the dishes, Charlotte opened a hallway closet to find an extra blanket for the guest room. A small wooden memory box slipped from the top shelf and landed gently on the floor. The lid opened just enough for several old photographs to slide across the hardwood. I knelt to gather them, then froze. Every picture featured the two of us. College football games. Charity races. Thanksgiving dinners. Christmas mornings with our families. 15 years of ordinary moments carefully preserved. Beneath the photographs rested dozens of ticket stubs, birthday cards, pressed wildflowers, and tiny handwritten notes I had completely forgotten giving her. Charlotte stared at the collection with quiet embarrassment before speaking. "I never throw away anything that reminds me of you." My heart skipped as I lifted the final item from the bottom of the box. It was a reservation confirmation dated almost 10 years earlier for a candlelit restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. 2 guests. Valentine's Day. Under the reservation, in Charlotte's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words she had crossed out but never erased. "Tell her how you feel." Charlotte stood perfectly still, her fingers resting on the faded reservation card as though it might disappear if she breathed too deeply. I had watched her negotiate impossible contracts, calm nervous investors, and answer impossible questions from reporters without ever losing her composure. Yet a few crossed-out words written 10 years earlier had accomplished what none of those challenges ever could. She looked vulnerable. "I cancelled the reservation the morning before Valentine's Day," she admitted quietly. "I convinced myself you would think I was ruining the best friendship either of us had ever known." I smiled sadly as I held one of the old photographs from the memory box. It showed us sitting on a dock in Maine, our shoes abandoned beside the water while we shared a paper cup filled with blueberry ice cream. "Do you remember that afternoon?" I asked. Charlotte nodded immediately. "You told me life moved too fast and that we should always save one day every year to do absolutely nothing." I laughed softly. "I secretly hoped you would hold my hand that day." She looked at me in complete surprise. "Emily." I shrugged, unable to hide my smile anymore. Apparently we have been astonishingly bad at communicating for a very long time. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The silence no longer felt awkward. Instead, it felt honest, as though every quiet moment from the past 15 years had finally gathered into one room and was patiently waiting for us to catch up. Charlotte carefully closed the memory box before carrying it into the living room. She placed it on the coffee table beside the unopened champagne bottle that had somehow traveled home from Las Vegas with the rest of our luggage. "Do you know what frightens me the most?" she asked. I expected her to mention the board meeting or the headlines or the investors. Instead, she looked directly into my eyes. "That we wasted 10 years believing the other person could never possibly choose us." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I had completely forgotten. Saturday brunch with Charlotte. Recurring. Every second Saturday for the past 12 years. I stared at the notification and laughed through the emotion gathering in my chest. We scheduled standing brunch appointments farther into the future than most people schedule vacations. Charlotte glanced at my screen and smiled. "Because no matter how busy life became, I never wanted to lose time with you." We decided to keep the reservation. An hour later we found ourselves sitting in our favorite neighborhood cafe, the same corner table where countless conversations had unfolded over fresh coffee and blueberry pancakes. The waitress recognized us instantly. "You two are finally wearing matching rings," she said with a delighted grin. I had been telling everyone for years that this was going to happen. Charlotte and I exchanged stunned looks. "You thought we were together?" I asked. The waitress laughed warmly. "Honey, everyone thought you were together except the two of you." She walked away before either of us could respond. I looked around the cafe and slowly realized how familiar every detail felt. The owner waved at Charlotte by name. A couple near the window smiled at us as though nothing about this morning seemed unusual. It was as if the world had quietly accepted a truth that we had spent years refusing to acknowledge. When we returned to the penthouse that afternoon, a black town car was already waiting outside. Charlotte's chief of staff stepped onto the sidewalk carrying a leather portfolio. "The board meeting has been moved forward," she said carefully. "There is one more complication." Charlotte accepted the folder without speaking. Inside was a formal proposal prepared by several senior directors. They believed the marriage had created unnecessary uncertainty for the company. Their recommendation was simple, immediate, and impossible to ignore. They wanted Charlotte to announce a public annulment before the opening bell on Wall Street Monday morning. The conference room overlooking Lower Manhattan had always impressed me with its breathtaking view, but that morning I barely noticed the skyline. Every seat around the polished walnut table was occupied long before Charlotte and I arrived. Directors, legal advisors, senior executives, and investors who had helped build one of the largest companies in America all turned toward us at exactly the same moment. Charlotte greeted them with her usual calm professionalism, but I recognized the subtle change in her breathing as she reached for my hand beneath the table. It lasted only a second before she gently let go, yet that small gesture gave me more reassurance than any speech ever could. The chairman cleared his throat first. "Charlotte, your leadership has never been questioned. However, the market reacts to uncertainty, and this marriage has created unnecessary speculation." Another director slid a folder across the table. "An annulment announced before trading opens tomorrow would stabilize investor confidence immediately." Charlotte opened the folder without expression. Every page contained projections, polling data, media analysis, and financial forecasts. They had calculated the value of public perception down to fractions of a percentage point. What they had not calculated was the value of 15 years of friendship. "You are asking me to make a personal decision for financial reasons," Charlotte said evenly. "We are asking you to protect the company," another executive replied. "Your personal happiness has never interfered with your responsibilities before." The room fell silent. I realized they were all waiting for Charlotte to agree because that was exactly what she had always done. She had sacrificed weekends, birthdays, vacations, and countless ordinary moments whenever the company needed her. It was simply who she had become. I quietly placed my hand over the folder and gently pushed it closed. Every face turned toward me. "May I say something?" I asked. Charlotte nodded almost imperceptibly. I looked around the table before speaking. "I have spent 15 years watching Charlotte choose this company over herself more times than I can count. Every major success represented here came with a personal cost that very few people ever noticed. If an annulment is truly what she wants, then I will support that decision completely. But if you are asking her to do it because she believes everyone else expects another sacrifice, then perhaps the company has already taken enough." No one interrupted. Even the chairman remained silent. Charlotte looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, equal parts gratitude and heartbreak. After the meeting ended, we rode the elevator down together without saying a word. The lobby buzzed with reporters waiting behind security barriers, camera flashes reflecting against the glass walls as soon as we appeared. Charlotte's security team quickly escorted us toward the waiting car, but just before the rear door closed, she stopped walking. "Emily," she said quietly. "If I choose the company today, I lose you." I immediately shook my head. "No. You could never lose me." She searched my face as though trying to decide whether to believe me. "You say that now." I smiled sadly. "Because it has already been true for 15 years. Charlotte looked toward the crowd of reporters calling her name from across the sidewalk. For the first time since I had known her, she ignored every camera completely. Instead, she turned back toward me with unexpected determination. "Then I cannot ask you to wait another day." Before I could respond, her chief of staff hurried toward us holding a tablet. "Charlotte," she said breathlessly, "someone leaked the video from the chapel. It has already reached millions of people, and there is one moment everyone is talking about." Charlotte took the tablet, pressed play, and both of us heard her own voice from the ceremony speaking words neither of us could remember saying until now. "I have loved you for longer than I have been brave enough to admit." Charlotte replayed the short video 3 times before lowering the tablet. Around us, reporters continued calling her name, camera shutters clicking in rapid bursts, but for a few precious seconds the noise faded into the background. Her own voice echoed in my mind instead. "I have loved you for longer than I have been brave enough to admit." Those words did not sound rehearsed. They did not sound influenced by excitement or celebration. They sounded like someone who had finally grown tired of carrying a secret alone. Charlotte slowly looked up at me, her blue eyes brighter than I had ever seen them. "I said it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "I finally said it." I smiled through tears I had been trying unsuccessfully to hide. Apparently you did. Her chief of staff gently interrupted us. The board is requesting an immediate statement. They need to know whether the annulment announcement is still happening. Charlotte nodded politely but did not answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the waiting car, then stopped halfway. For the first time since I had met her, she looked like someone choosing between two completely different futures. One was familiar, predictable, safe. The other carried uncertainty, public attention, and consequences no financial forecast could calculate. I quietly reached for her hand. Whatever you decide, I said softly, make sure it is your decision this time. She looked down at our wedding bands before giving my hand the gentlest squeeze. For years, she said, I believed leadership meant always choosing the option that disappointed me the most because everyone else depended on it. I am beginning to wonder whether I misunderstood leadership entirely. We stepped into the car together, asking the driver to take the long route through Central Park instead of returning directly to headquarters. Neither of us wanted another conference room. We needed air, trees, and a few uninterrupted moments to hear our own thoughts. Autumn leaves drifted across the walking paths as families pushed strollers, joggers passed with friendly smiles, and children chased pigeons without caring about stock prices or headlines. It felt wonderfully ordinary. Charlotte removed her shoes and laughed quietly as we walked along the lake. Do you remember the first promise we ever made each other? She asked. I thought for a moment before smiling. No matter how successful or how busy life became, we would never become strangers. She nodded. I almost broke that promise. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I convinced myself protecting everything else mattered more. We found an empty bench overlooking the water, the same bench where we had celebrated one of her earliest business victories more than a decade before. I remembered buying 2 pretzels from a nearby street vendor because it was all we could afford to celebrate at the time. Charlotte smiled as if reading my thoughts. Back then I thought becoming successful would finally make me fearless. I laughed softly. Instead it just gave you bigger things to worry about. She laughed with me before growing serious again. Emily, if we leave here and I tell the board there will be no annulment, there is a real chance I lose my position. I looked out across the quiet water shimmering beneath the afternoon sun. Then we build a different future. Together. Those final words seemed to settle something inside her. She stood, slipped her shoes back on, and drew one steady breath. Her shoulders straightened, not with the practiced confidence of a chief executive preparing for another negotiation, but with the quiet certainty of someone finally telling the truth. As we returned to the waiting car, her phone buzzed one last time. The chairman had sent a single sentence. The press conference has been moved to 5 o'clock. Every network in America will be watching. By 5 o'clock every major news network had switched to the live press conference. Cameras stretched across the auditorium, reporters filled every seat, and thousands of employees watched from offices around the world. Charlotte stood behind the podium wearing the same quiet confidence that had guided her company through impossible moments for years, but this time she did not begin with quarterly numbers or market forecasts. She looked toward me where I stood just beyond the stage, smiled gently, and then faced the room. Thank you all for being here, she said. During the past 48 hours there has been significant attention surrounding my personal life. My board prepared a statement announcing an annulment because many believed that was the most responsible path forward. A wave of camera flashes filled the room. Charlotte paused before continuing. I appreciate the concern for this company. I always will. But leadership also requires honesty, and today I owe you the truth. The auditorium became completely silent. Las Vegas did not create my feelings. It revealed them. The woman I married has been my closest friend for 15 years. We built trust long before we built headlines. We simply spent too many years believing silence was safer than hope. I felt tears gathering again as every word echoed through the room with remarkable calm. Charlotte glanced toward me once more before smiling with unmistakable warmth. There will be no annulment. Not because of impulse. Not because of publicity. Because after reading letters we were too afraid to send, after remembering promises we forgot we had made, and after realizing how much of our lives had already belonged to each other, I refused to spend another decade pretending the most important person in my life is only my friend. Questions erupted immediately, but something unexpected happened before the moderators could restore order. One by one, employees seated throughout the auditorium began applauding. The sound spread across the room until even several board members slowly joined in. The chairman remained seated for a long moment before finally standing as well. Later that evening, financial analysts reported that the company's stock had barely moved. Investors had decided stability was not measured by avoiding love but by trusting honest leadership. A week later, Charlotte surprised me with one final invitation. We flew back to Las Vegas, not because we doubted what had happened there, but because we wanted one memory that belonged completely to us. We returned to the same little chapel just after sunrise. This time there were no missing memories, no unanswered questions, and no unopened letters waiting in the future. We renewed our vows in front of only a handful of witnesses, laughing when the officiant recognized us from the news. Afterward we walked outside into the warm desert morning, hand in hand, exactly as we had in the forgotten recording, except now we remembered every smile, every promise, and every heartbeat. Before leaving, Charlotte reached into her purse and handed me 2 fresh envelopes. "What are these?" I asked. She smiled with the same hopeful expression I had first seen in the chapel video. "Letters," she answered. "One for you. One for me. We are going to open them together every anniversary so we never allow another truth to wait 10 years. I laughed, slipped my arm through hers, and looked toward the endless Nevada sky. Sometimes people think love arrives in one extraordinary moment, but ours had quietly grown through ordinary breakfasts, delayed flights, forgotten holidays, impossible dreams, and 15 years of choosing each other without understanding why. The wedding was never the beginning of our story. It was simply the morning we finally woke up to the life our hearts had been writing all along.